So Jantzen Dunn has committed to The Ohio State. The rich get richer. We got to talk about it after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You got to help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, we got to talk about Jantzen Dunn, who is the #1 player in Kentucky, an athlete who figures to play on the defense side of the ball, and was one that the University of Oklahoma was really high on. Roy Manning had done a phenomenal job recruiting him, and it looked like last Saturday night he was all set and ready to commit to the University of Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley tweets out the eyes, which in OU territory means that he had picked up a commit. We heard through the grapevine that that was going to be Jantzen Dunn. And then as quickly as that happened, it seemed to flip on its head. A silent commit gets blocked by The Ohio State and eventually flipped to The Ohio State on Monday afternoon when Jantzen decided to announce publicly that he is the 17th commit in Ohio State's 2021 recruiting class. That is phenomenal, and I believe pushes it over the 300 mark when we're talking about points, and that's usually enough to win you a recruiting national championship. We've had years where no school has got 300 points in the 247 Sports Composite and won the recruiting national championship. Now, for them to do this in April is bonkers because basically since the dead period began, and by the dead period I mean the mandatory one, the one imposed by the NCAA in March, all Ohio State done is just stack quality recruit on top of quality recruit. Starting with not even a guy that was even in their class. Trey Sermon goes into the portal from Oklahoma, ends up at Ohio State, which is just another opportunity that Ohio State used to dunk on Oklahoma. Then we had Evan Pryor, Travion Henderson, Tumise Adeleye. We've seen guys just continue to just come through over and over, Jakailin Johnson, and decide that they're going to make this recruiting class not just good, but one of the best that we have ever seen. And by the end of this, could be the best that we had ever seen. They are going to try to challenge 2014 Florida as the highest ranked recruiting class in the history of recruiting rankings. And it also gives them a defensive backfield that is replete with outstanding talent. Jantzen, as I said, is going with Jakailin Johnson, a couple other guys out there that are really good. And it's not just that these kids are good. It's that any one of these guys changes the program anywhere else they go, right? Tumise Adeleye, as I had said before he committed to Ohio State, changes the balance of power in defensive line play for Ohio State if it wasn't already that way. And now you have this 21 class that could be not just the best that we've seen on paper going into, but could it turned out to be one of the better classes that we've seen both at the college level and in the NFL, because it wasn't that long ago that Ohio State's 2015 class was also ridiculous. And Joe Burrow was a rook on it and wasn't even really thought about. Ezekiel Elliott, the Bosa brothers. You could talk about Von Bell, Michael Thomas, and keep going about how good that class was following 2014 national championship where they were led by Cardale Jones and JT Barrett. What's remarkable about this class is Ryan Day and his group of staff members is out recruiting, one, themselves, and two, Urban Meyer. And I didn't know that we would ever live in a place where Ryan Day is putting together a better recruiting class than Urban Meyer ever thought about putting together, because that's what Urban Meyer does. He puts together outstanding recruiting classes, runs his basketball on grass, hires a capable defensive coordinator, and they go and win games and they go win championships. And Ohio State now looks like they are trying to get back to where they have been this decade and in the decade before, which is to rule college football and to challenge not just the likes of Michigan, who they continue to just beat the hell out of, or even Notre Dame, who is next to them, but Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, the teams that we expect to be there at the end playing for national championships, LSU. Like, that's a game that I really want to see now. Now that we've seen that Clemson got styled on by LSU, thought Ohio State might be a better matchup for LSU. Probably still would have been the case. And they go into a year where they're also expected to compete for a national championship in 2020. And then with this class of 21, be stacked for years to come. Jantzen is just another guy that leads us to this understanding of how Ohio State is able to really narrow down and narrow the field, and also will pull its card, pull rank on these other teams that we all think of as blue bloods that ought to be able to out-recruit the likes of an Ohio State for guys that they were already ahead of, right? I thought that that Oklahoma should have been able to seal this deal for a dude that is very much in their wheelhouse, is very much the kind of guy that fits into an Alex Grinch-led scheme, and for which usually they can flip that kid into the kind that they think, one, can help them on the defensive side of the ball, but also that they can convince him they can put him in the NFL. But that's not something that OU's been able to say, particularly in the secondary level. Like we're talking about Parnell Motley, could be the highest drafted defensive back in the past 10 years for Oklahoma. Meanwhile, if you look at Ohio State, Jeff Okudah might be the third player off the board. And you also get to look at guys like Eli Apple, who was also in that 2015 class, and then Marcus Lattimore and Denzel Ward, and on we go. And many of you know I'm on the Paycom Jim Thorpe Award, which means that we are responsible for identifying the nation's top defensive backs and then the nation's top defensive back finalists, for which we send out those 3 finalists for a vote among our near 400 members to find out who should be that guy. Last year, it was Grant Delpit, but Jeff Okudah was a finalist for this award. I pay attention to defense back play in a way that I just don't pay attention to any other position. I mean, it's the one that I focus on. And I think that it is perhaps the second most important position on a football team behind a quarterback. You could talk about edge rusher maybe being there. But if I have a defensive back that can be versatile, play slot, play corner, play safety, play free and strong, and play me some weak side linebacker in a pinch, like a Minkah Fitzpatrick, that's more valuable to me than an edge rusher. That's more valuable to me than a left tackle. I need a guy that can really shore up all of the problems in my defense. And then having Kerry Combs come back from a stint with the Tennessee Titans, for which they were a game away from playing in the Super Bowl, and watching him be able to pick up where he left off while also bolstering Al Washington, Tony Alford, Larry Johnson Sr., Brian Hartline, and to help them help themselves in this era of Zoom, in this era of, well, FaceTime, where you can't actually bring kids onto campus. And we thought that many of these kids would wait until they can take their official visits, but not knowing, I should say, when you can take your official visits, what are you going to tell them? Except, hey, this is what we have done in the past. The NFL draft is coming up. Take a look at, check the receipts, right? The receipts say we're the best at this. And if that's your argument and that's what the kids are buying into, you could see how Ohio State is able to open up a tremendous lead on this thing. Also, add to this with the commitment of Jansen Dunn. It's not just that you're adding to your already number 1 class, it's that you're making the pool that much smaller for anybody else. Notably, Alabama, Oklahoma, Florida, who's in the top 5, right? Notre Dame, who just got boxed out of the top 5 by USC, who is surging. And you're able to do this without heavily going into Georgia or heavily going into California. You can still, Ohio State basically has a pipeline to Texas. Take a look at J.K. Dobbins, Jeff Okudah, who I already mentioned, Garrett Wilson. And those are just 3. This is getting to be out of hand for a lot of non-Ohio State fans. And I get that there's a lot of people that are watching this that are looking at this show going, man, RG's talking a lot of Ohio State. 1, that's the news. And 2, have you seen what they're doing? It's not about being a fan of the team or not being a fan of the team. It's about appreciating what is going on during a pandemic, 1, and 2, that this probably doesn't happen if there's not a pandemic. I don't think that Ohio State would have been able to put together this class if these particular sets of circumstances had not come together in this very weird year that is 2020, which is a year that we have all punted on. The last thing I would add to this is, do they stick? Doesn't really matter to me right now. Okay? Doesn't really matter to me right now because it's April and because usually you have 1 or 2, maybe even 3 that decide to flip a commitment or decommit. But even so, usually those guys recommit and sign. Even at Oklahoma, we saw this 2019 class. Theo Weiss was committed, decommitted, then recommitted. Okay? You've seen it before. And it's more likely to happen. Evan Neal did it at Alabama. Right? Probably going to be one of their better tackles going up through the ranks here in the next couple of years. So that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that you are able to get them to announce it publicly and that you don't have to rely on the silent commit. They got burned by B. John Robinson, who was a silent commit to Ohio State. They got burned by Kendall Milton, who was a silent commit to Ohio State. And now they're getting kids to come out straight up and say it, and they're getting quality kids. Between Evan Pryor and Travion Henderson, that's 2 dudes that could make anybody else's class awesome, right? The only way that this gets even more ridiculous is perhaps maybe you add another quarterback. Maybe you add another offensive tackle like a J.C. Latham. Maybe Emeka Egbuka ends up becoming an Ohio State Buckeye along with JT Tuimala. Then it's another level of insane. And that's the kind of point that I'm making here is they're not done yet, okay? If Washington doesn't hold on to those in-state kids, we're looking at a new world order in college football that only Ohio State fans are going to be happy about. All right, that's it for me. Doses.